impressive group of people in this audience, and my purpose is to talk about the people who actually do the work, those that are going to carry forward the opportunities that the Future Fund is promising, and also to talk about the risks and the needs that need to be addressed at the moment about what we have. So when the Future Fund was announced, as you saw from our Treasurer, this was an exciting moment for the workforce. But we need to think about how we address it, and we also need to talk about the position that we all come to this discussion with different prejudices, promises and hopes. And I think it's very important to address the conflicts and biases that we have. So we're all trying to protect our territory and make sure that we achieve what are important goals for our own domains. So we tend to be familiar with the traditional models of funding, and I think the business models that we currently use within the medical research environment are dependent upon the current funding schemes. And when we change those, we change the funding model's capacity to deliver. And of course, for a workforce, change is threatening, so we need to be mindful of how we can massage the changes to achieve success and not lose people, bring more people into the environment, and give them the skills to move across the sector. So the viewpoints that we have come basically because of the constituencies that we represent, the status and time of our careers, and in this forum particularly, the way we think we might use this funding. So from a researcher that works in a hospital, works within the cancer space, I have particular prejudices that come to this discussion. I'm involved in ASMR and have been for a long time, and I represent a group of researchers who consider themselves to be part of the leadership group in the country. I also have agencies that support my research, and these cut across a broad spectrum. Many of them are commercial entities, and of course that influences the way I think about it as well. So what does our workforce look like? Well, the actual fact is we don't know. We're still trying to understand this. Probably ASMR has done the most to understand this. You cannot extract the data from the ABS, and you probably wouldn't be able to do it this year for sure. So we think there's something like 18 to 24,000 people in the sector who could reasonably claim themselves to be medical researchers. But I think that number is larger or smaller depending on how stringent or generous you are in that description. The NHMRC, our major funding body, supports around about 10,000 medical researchers. And that comes from this fund we've heard a little bit about, the MREA, which I'm going to talk a bit more about as we go forward. The numbers are shifting within this mix of 10,000 people. The number of part-time researchers is increasing substantially, and we find it's probably unusual to have anyone's research salary funded entirely by the grant that they receive from the NHMRC. So arguably we are the most educated and qualified sector in the whole of the economy, and we're probably amongst the most underpaid, so it's something to think about. We also should think about our workforce. The group of, the engine of drive in a lot of labs are PhD students, and we continually, in my view, exploit that work. We pay them less than the minimum wage, and they are extraordinary individuals we need to give some consideration on. And maybe this is the time when we've got a new model of potential funding that we can think about supporting these individuals a bit more generously. Now, the major sites of research are clearly within the universities and the MRIs. We still really don't understand what's going on in hospitals. We know that research goes on. Some hospitals do more or less, but we don't know that mix, and I think this is another example of not knowing what the workforce is about. So regarding what we're doing at the moment, no question we have the best facilities that we've ever had. The buildings are gorgeous. I've just moved into one in Melbourne, the Comprehensive Cancer Centre. It's gorgeous, architectural delight. But remember, stations are not trains. You don't move a population around in a transport system with stations, you use trains. So infrastructure remains to be a big gap, and this has been addressed by our colleagues in the independent medical research environment. Those institutes are very aware of the weaknesses of our infrastructure support. Universities are rewarded by funding PhD student completions, but they're absorbing fewer people in academic roles. So this is an opportunity, but also a risk. And we've never had more PhDs worldwide. Most of you would know of the thousands of PhDs being pumped out in Asia, most particularly China. This workforce is highly trained, very innovative, and they're hungry for success. And we need to be mindful we've got to give people gainful use of all those talents. We've never been in a worse position for the support of our early and mid-career researchers. Now, people whinge about this all the time. I'm not whinging about myself, but I'm whinging about the people that I am responsible for, and you are all in this audience responsible for this group. They are deeply anxious. They've never been less secure, and we're losing them. And we've talked about getting clinical researchers into the environment. Let's not forget that we need basic medical researchers to feed the pipeline of discovery in this sector. So that point emphasised again, the people are the engine of innovation and discovery. And there are certainly rewards for commercialisation, but these are very hard to realise at the moment. And this is a great opportunity for the Future Fund. There is an appetite for translation. Everyone is willing to get involved in it, but it's very, very hard. And sometimes when you do, you get punished for it by losing your grants because you're not publishing the number of papers, which are the only metrics by which we're measured. So we've got to get a little bit smarter about this. The NHMRC has failed in the past to model the impact of the second round of the Medical Research Endowment Account doubling. This is a fabulous success, but we didn't work out what might happen if it didn't grow again. And we need to understand that. And fortunately, the NHMRC is addressing this role, and under the leadership of Steve, this committee is working to try to understand this structure to get the best out of what we have. The ARC, another area of funding, which is not so strong within the MRIs or within the universities, is very important. And this is another part of the engine of discovery. But it's structured now where it's limited in its funding and it's becoming restricted in its access. And I consider this to be a pretty anti-competitive environment, although understandable. So it's very clear that all of us are not looking at the Future Fund as being a mirror of the Medical Research Endowment Account. We're certainly expecting it to drive change and do complementary things, not the same things. So the problem we have at the moment in the sector is we're not almost allowed to talk about the Medical Research Endowment Account. We've got to get the MRFF over the line before we can talk about it. But I think that is a risky strategy. We need to be doing both, and both of them are complementary. It's unlikely that the Future Fund will be an employer of any quasi kind like the NHMRC. We understand that. It's likely to be contractual, it's likely to be short-term, and it's going to be KPI-driven as it would with any other contractual arrangement. And therefore we expect a benefit to the workforce, but it will be a different benefit. It will be a different kind of employment, and that's all fine, but we need to define it. So, the place at the moment where we enjoy our funding is this pie here, Medical Research Endowment Account, and it's a lot of money, more than we've ever had in history, but the last 5 years it's basically been in stasis. It's trying to do too many things now, and it's struggling to achieve all those objectives. So they want a partner, and I think what's happened is, and it's a beautiful segue from what John Shine was saying, we need to examine the lessons we have of things that have worked pretty well with the NHMRC, but possibly could be worked a little bit better. So what are the gaps and the opportunities? So I certainly see that the development grants area is a clear opportunity to quickly respond to a gap. This has actually been a pretty successful scheme, but it's underfunded and it's undercooked, and it could do a lot better. And certainly the other area is the way we deliver health in centres of excellence and the like. So we need to actually have our universities doing a big part of this. We need to train our students to be savvy in the biotech industry because they're going to need to respond to that as a place of future employment as well. We need to reward those organisations which have the culture and the capacity to embed commercialisation activities within their very domains to achieve a complementarity that we know can occur, and there are examples where it does, but we need to ramp that up across the sector. We we need to understand something else, that if we don't keep an eye on the ball about the role of the endowment account, we're going to be in big trouble, because this is where the discoveries are born. You do not have a pipeline of any benefit unless you keep feeding things in at the beginning. So the ARC is an unspoken part of this discussion mostly, and this is very important too. There's lots of discoveries within the universities driven by ARC funding that has direct benefit to the health system, and we're not benefiting enough for those, and we're not supporting them enough. So, the status of the MREA is under threat in delivering the innovation, the promise that delivers in that pipeline, and it also supports the training of the very people who are going to deliver on the Future Fund. We cannot forget we need to train a workforce that's nimble and has the capacity to get the best out of this economic opportunity. So, my final words on this, and I've got one other slide. So the workforce sees the Future Fund as being the next big hope. No question, it's an exciting time. And it's an opportunity to build new bridges between industry and the researchers and to share their skills. But I like to think about this as a bridge, and not about a bridge to span the translational valley of death. That does exist, but it can be overcome, and lots of people have got over that valley. But I like to think of a bridge as having two parts, a beginning and end, a start on one side of a river and a finish on the other. And without having the MREA on one side, the Future Fund will not be able to bridge across to the other. And we need to support both, and we need to talk about both. So there are lots of models, and we've seen some of them that work. And I've just got a little anecdote which really impressed me. I was recently in Norway working with a company where we just initiated a clinical trial. And I was really impressed by this experience. At the Oslo Cancer Centre, I was given a tour around there. I've got some mates there now. And I remind you, Norway is essentially a quarter, perhaps a fifth of our size. They also got on this idea of endowment accounts or future funds or sovereign funds, and they've probably led the world in this. And they are a very wealthy country. But in this cancer cluster, there was a whole section of the hospital, not another building, not in another place, embedded in the hospital, a whole floor of offices and research activities of people of this kind. An enormous amount of industry connection where you embed the activities within the organisation which delivers the healthcare, just like in a coal mine where you dig the coal, you have the workers working in that coal mine. Similarly, you have the people who are going to change the culture of the researchers, and the researchers bring discoveries and different thoughts to the pharma or the organisations involved. We need to use these kinds of models. They're not new, but they are very, very powerful. So, final points. The Development Research Fund is an opportunity to deal with now. We certainly understand that the Centres of Excellence can deliver our health outcomes, and I think there's an opportunity as well. And finally, we need to reward those organisations which support their workforce not only in employing them, but training them and giving them a place where they have a future as well. So thank you.